Rogue planets. Just the name alone sounds unsettling. These mysterious worlds drift aimlessly through space, unbound to any star, moving in complete darkness. Unlike planets in our solar system that orbit the sun in predictable paths, rogue planets are wild, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous. But what would actually happen if one of these rogue planets collided with Earth? Is this just a sci-fi nightmare, or could it really happen? Let's dive into this terrifying scenario and break it all down. First, let's talk about what a rogue planet actually is. Scientists believe rogue planets are planets that were once part of a solar system, but got ejected due to gravitational disturbances. Maybe a close encounter with a larger planet, or a passing star knocked them loose. Without a star to keep them in orbit, these planets are left to drift endlessly through the cosmos. Some are smaller, like rocky Earth-sized planets, while others are gas giants, even bigger than Jupiter. The scary part? They're nearly invisible. Since they don't orbit a star, they don't reflect much light, making them incredibly difficult to detect. Now, could one of these rogue planets actually collide with Earth? The short answer: it's extremely unlikely, but not impossible. Space is massive, and Earth's orbit is a tiny target in the grand scale of the universe. But with potentially billions of rogue planets floating through the galaxy, the idea that one could eventually cross paths with our planet is still a possibility, no matter how small. So let's say, hypothetically, that a rogue planet is headed straight for us. How much time would we have to react? That depends on how fast it's moving and how soon we detect it. Since rogue planets don't emit their own light, they're nearly invisible until they get close. If a planet the size of Earth or larger were on a collision course with us, we might not even see it until it was only a few years or even months away. That wouldn't give humanity much time to prepare. Before impact, we'd start seeing some major warning signs. The gravitational pull of a rogue planet approaching Earth would start disrupting our own orbit. We might experience shifts in the tides, extreme weather changes, and even a slight alteration in the length of our days. If the rogue planet had its own moons, they could create additional gravitational disturbances, possibly affecting the orbits of other planets in our solar system as well. As it got closer, the night sky would change. What looked like just another star at first would grow into a massive looming object, bigger and bigger with each passing night. And then the real nightmare begins. Next, we'll dive into what happens the moment of impact, the sheer force of the collision, the explosion it would create, and the immediate destruction it would bring. The devastation would be unlike anything Earth has ever seen. The moment of impact would be unlike anything Earth has ever experienced. As the rogue planet closes in, the sky would be completely dominated by its massive form. It wouldn't be a slow collision. This thing would be moving at an unimaginable speed, likely tens of thousands of miles per hour. The sheer force of that much mass traveling so fast would release more energy than all the nuclear weapons on Earth combined. The impact itself would be an explosion on a planetary scale. If the rogue planet were similar in size to Earth, the force of the collision would likely crack the planet's crust open, sending molten rock and debris flying into space. A blinding fireball would engulf entire continents in seconds. Shockwaves would ripple through the atmosphere, flattening everything in their path. The impact zone itself wouldn't just be destroyed, it would be vaporized instantly. Mountains would be turned to dust, oceans would boil away, and anything even remotely close to ground zero wouldn't stand a chance. But the destruction wouldn't stop there. The force of the impact would send massive seismic waves racing through the Earth, causing earthquakes stronger than anything ever recorded. These quakes wouldn't just shake the ground, they would rip the planet's crust apart, creating massive fissures that could stretch for thousands of miles. Entire continents could shift, and some land masses might even sink into the ocean. Then come the tsunamis. If the rogue planet hit the ocean, the explosion would create waves so massive they would make even the biggest known tsunamis look tiny in comparison. These waves wouldn't just hit coastlines, they would travel inland for hundreds of miles, wiping out entire cities and reshaping the geography of the planet. Even landlocked regions wouldn't be safe, as floods and rising sea levels would follow. In the atmosphere, things wouldn't be any better. The collision would send trillions of tons of rock and debris hurtling into the sky, blocking out the sun and creating a choking, thick cloud of dust that would plunge the planet into darkness. The heat from the impact would ignite global firestorms, burning forests, cities, and anything else that could catch fire. The world would turn into a smoldering, ash-covered wasteland in a matter of hours. And then, the long-term effects would begin. As we move on, we'll explore what happens after the initial destruction, the devastating climate changes, the collapse of ecosystems, and the grim reality of what life, if any, could survive in the aftermath. After the initial chaos of the impact, Earth would begin to experience one of the harshest climates imaginable. The atmosphere, now filled with debris, would block out sunlight for months, even years. The planet would plunge into a prolonged darkness, triggering what's known as an impact winter. Without sunlight, temperatures would plummet worldwide. In many areas, the freezing temperatures would make it impossible for life to survive. The cold would be extreme, with some regions dropping well below freezing, even in the summer months. The Earth's climate would be thrown into complete disarray. Plants, which rely on sunlight for photosynthesis, would die off, crops would fail, and the already unstable ecosystems would collapse. Animals that depend on plant life for food would starve, and herbivores would quickly follow suit. Carnivores would face similar fates as their food sources would dwindle. This massive loss of life would disrupt the food chain entirely. Some species might be able to adapt in the short term, but many others would be wiped out. The Earth's biodiversity could shrink drastically, and ecosystems could take millions of years to recover, if they ever do. The air, already thick with ash and dust, would become toxic as chemicals from the impact seep into the atmosphere. The lack of sunlight would halt the process of photosynthesis, which would lead to a shortage of oxygen. Plants are a key source of oxygen on Earth, so without them, the planet's oxygen levels would drop dramatically, further endangering life. The absence of a stable atmosphere and the presence of these toxic gases could create a hostile environment for any remaining organisms. In addition to this, the Earth's magnetic field might be severely disrupted. The impact could shift the planet's axis, potentially causing erratic weather patterns, extreme seasonal shifts, and even making certain regions of the planet uninhabitable. A change in the tilt of the planet could also affect the day-night cycle, possibly making days much longer or shorter, adding to the already unstable conditions. The most terrifying aspect of this scenario is that these changes wouldn't be temporary. Even after the dust and debris begin to settle, the Earth would still be a shell of what it once was. The combination of the planet's severely damaged ecosystem, drastically reduced oxygen levels, and intense radiation would create a world that's nearly impossible to survive in. Any remaining survivors would face an extremely harsh, inhospitable reality. In the next part, we'll look at the possibility of life on Earth enduring this catastrophe, the long-term survival of humanity, and the potential for rebuilding in a world so drastically changed. The aftermath of a rogue planet collision would undoubtedly leave Earth in a state of chaos and near destruction, but what about the possibility of life hanging on? Could humanity, or any form of life, make a comeback after such a catastrophic event? While the future would seem grim, the concept of resilience remains a possible, though unlikely, factor in this nightmare scenario. For humanity, the surviving few would face an unimaginable challenge. Those who managed to survive the initial impact and subsequent extreme conditions would be forced into isolated, harsh environments, possibly underground or in specially designed shelters that could withstand the cold, lack of oxygen, and radiation. These shelters would be critical, as any remaining surface life would likely be unsustainable for long periods. The possibility of finding food would be near impossible, given the collapse of ecosystems. Any remaining crops would have been destroyed by the freezing temperatures, and the few animals left alive would be under intense pressure from the hostile environment. In terms of technology, humanity might have a chance to use what resources are left to rebuild. It wouldn't be a quick process, though. Even with the most advanced tools, the lack of resources, combined with the extreme environmental conditions, would make survival a constant struggle. The limited supplies of food and water would soon run out, and the lack of any meaningful trade or production would leave societies isolated, clinging to whatever was left of civilization. The loss of power, internet, and communication would make it impossible to maintain any form of global government or coordinated effort to recover from the catastrophe. Surviving in the aftermath of a rogue planet collision would also mean facing a planet that's unrecognizable. Earth's environment would continue to shift unpredictably with the lack of a stable ecosystem, making recovery even more difficult. If any plants or animals could adapt to the new brutal conditions, it would likely take thousands or even millions of years for them to evolve into something resembling life as we knew it before, The survival of humanity would depend on how well the remaining survivors could adapt to the changes and utilize the little they have left. The idea of a rogue planet hitting Earth remains a terrifying hypothetical, but it's one that serves as a reminder of how fragile our existence truly is. The universe is full of unpredictable forces, and though the chances of a rogue planet colliding with Earth are incredibly slim, the devastation it would cause is something we cannot ignore. This scenario pushes us to think about our place in the cosmos and reminds us that we must continue to study the unknowns of space to understand more about the dangers that may lurk beyond our solar system. With advancements in technology and space exploration, humanity might one day be able to detect rogue planets early enough to make adjustments. We're already making strides in detecting objects that could threaten our planet, and hopefully with time, we'll have the tools to prevent such a catastrophe. But until then, the thought of a rogue planet colliding with Earth is a chilling reminder of the vulnerability of life on our planet. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the possibility of a rogue planet hitting Earth. If you got any thoughts or theories of your own, I'd love to hear them in the comments. And if you're interested in more discussions on the mysteries of space and Earth's future, don't forget to check out my other videos.